You're listening to This Week in E-Commerce, the Ecom Nation podcast. Dive into the top online retail headlines with your hosts, Paul Waddy and Mal Chia. Let's load up the cart. This Week in E-Commerce, lucky episode 13. I am Mal Chia and this is Paul Waddy. Paul, how are you again?
Good. Here we are, episode 13.
Lucky
already. 13. Lucky 13. Here we are. And I think it's going to be a good one. But first, how was your week last week?
My week was great. As I talked to you earlier this morning, I went on a Disney cruise, which is in Australia for the next few months, the first ever Disney cruise season. And I got to say, I wasn't sure what to expect because I've never been on a cruise before. And I was like, oh, am I really a cruise guy? I've grown up with all these images of like, if you're a cruise person, you're either like on one of the party cruises or you're potentially like in your 60s. But I went to this and I just went, man, I had such a great time. I went with my wife, my two youngest kids, and we just had an absolute ball. Mainly because you're forced to have fun because there's no Wi-Fi. You cannot do anything else except for just hang out by the pool, play the trivia games, go to the bar, eat at one of the many, many fine restaurants on board the boat, and swim and watch movies and just kind of just do stuff. And it was great. It was kind of forced relaxation time. So I'm looking forward to going again.
Okay. Well, sounds like you had fun. I like the idea of the no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I think, interestingly, slightly off topic, but you and I like to fly Qantas for the Wi-Fi and other things. And again, I was forced to, it was in Adelaide last week and flew Jetstar, which doesn't have Wi-Fi, despite what Andrew, our business partner, told me. And what was interesting though is, and I'll give a shout out to Ovi from eShopping Group, who I know listens. Ovi did that from Perth to Sydney and said that he used the opportunity to write in his diary or whatever and do some critical thinking. So I did the same. I opened my diary and I wrote out like 4 goals for next year and sat and thought about it and really, really enjoyed it. So the forced Wi-Fi detox.
I think it's a good thing. I think there's so many distractions in your everyday. There's this thing you need to do. You got to check this thing. You've got to follow up on whatever someone sent you an email that you just end up being beholden to someone else. You're not on your schedule anymore. Like your time is being literally stolen from you by all these things distracting you. But not having Wi-Fi means that people can't contact you, which means you end up doing the things you want to do.
Yeah, it was great. It was kind of a weird, anxious feeling, but it was really good.
Are you thinking about switching airline?
I just couldn't get a flight on Qantas, but I'm Qantas through it. You got me onto Qantas, and I'm Qantas through and through.
Excellent. Love to hear that. To hear that. Fantastic service again with Qantas going to Melbourne for the cruise. So shout out to the Qantas team there. Well done. But we've got another action-packed week. So Black Friday, we're going to be talking about a little bit later in terms of some early Black Friday observations as Black November has started and more retailers have kicked off their epic end-of-year sales. And we're going to be talking also about Google's latest core update and what that means for SEO and e-commerce. But before that, I want to kick off on a topic which we talked about a little while ago, which is about Crocs. Crocs, the shoes, you love them, you hate them, very polarizing shoes, as everyone knows, or footwear. They're not technically shoes, I don't believe, more slippers, I guess. In the news, and we talked about them a little while ago in the context of building a cult brand. And we talked about them in the sense that Post Malone made them super famous again because he is a huge fan. They did collaborations, and Crocs have since been on a massive tear and have become this huge cultural icon. Even on the Disney cruise, they were selling Disney branded Crocs, and there was like, I reckon every third person was getting around in Crocs. But they have just recently released their latest earnings report, which has shown that in the last quarter, their sales globally have increased 11.6% year on year to $1.24 billion, which is their highest sales ever. But also in APAC, the region which we're in, sales have increased by 26.5% to $272 million, which is just incredible. Again, in this climate, being able to record that sort of growth.
Not bad. And there's a trend here, isn't there? So we've done on this podcast, we've done Crocs, Skechers, Birkenstock. But what's interesting is very similar numbers actually to Skechers. So I think we're looking at about 6.8 billion for the year, which is outrageously big. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because kind of like Birkenstocks, I wouldn't be caught dead in them. But I guess like the more people you see them wearing them in a versatile way, every now and then I'm like, could I do it? And then my wife says, no, you couldn't. But yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, massive props to them. Like this is a serious company. And you and I were just talking about earlier about unique selling propositions. And it's funny, like if you remember, I think Crocs' whole, and I was just trying to check out their website now, but you know, their kind of whole thing was like a waterproof shoe that, if I recall correctly, like fishermen were wearing.
Yeah, they used to wear abattoirs. So abattoir workers wear Crocs as well because the blood just comes out of the holes.
Okay. Oh, is that right?
That's why abattoir workers wear Crocs.
Wow, why didn't they put that on their website?
Yeah, that's a unique selling proposition.
Yeah,
but it goes to show just like the power of the brand, but also it's such a distinctive product as well. Like it's iconic, right? Like you just know the Crocs, you know the shape, you know the design of it. So going like Byron Sharp, marketing professor, very famous, wrote the book How Brands Grow, talks about the importance about differentiation and then distinctiveness. So not just to have a brand which is differentiated, but also think about what are the elements of your brand which are distinctive. And they've clearly done that with a shape which is pretty damn distinctive. It's something which you see on someone and you automatically know that's a Crocs. Those are Crocs. Yeah,
they are distinctive. And I think what about these gibbets? These things that you can personalize your Crocs with. So Crocs have entered their form of personalization, which is essentially these whatever gibbets are, little things that you can attach to your Crocs
that's right.
to bedazzle them. So that's their kind of, but again, that's kind of like, how can you put your own personal stamp on your product? And I think that they've tapped into that. And the other thing that I think they've tapped into enormously is collabs and partnerships, which is something we've spoken about before. You just mentioned the Disney cruise, guaranteed Crocs. Yeah, they have a partnership with Disney, Star Wars, you name it. I think the NBA. So they've gone Harry Potter, Pokemon. They've gone extremely heavily into to partnerships. And if you look at that just there, the trending collections: Hello Kitty, Star Wars, NBA, Harry Potter. I would argue that those are four extremely different demographics. And we saw this with Skechers last week as well, right? Harry Kane, Snoop Dogg, Martha Stewart, and I can't remember the other one. But you're like, wow, like they are all so different. But that, I guess, is entering them into new audiences via these partnerships and collabs. And I think brands should be doing more of that, particularly as media costs are rising.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I feel like we repeat the same themes a few times.
Yeah,
and I think it's important because they're ones which clearly work. That's why we're talking about them.
Yeah.
All these brands who've been able to be really successful, they're focusing on those things which help them differentiate a market. They're not just pumping a whole lot of money into paid media or things like that. They're good products which have surrounded themselves by making with good marketing, good branding, which have made themselves cultural icons, like Crocs, but also Skechers as well. They're a brand which everyone knows about and you see everywhere, and they just become distinctive.
Absolutely.
So, Paul, now we are also right at the start of Black Friday. You and I have both seen plenty of brands which have recently launched their Black Friday sales. What are some of your early observations of what you're seeing?
Well, I guess what you just said, Mal, is that it's gone very early. So brands, I think we saw some brands start in October. So I think it's getting earlier and earlier and earlier. And I'm going to say a little bit of desperation. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I just seeing brands and hearing brands talking about up to 80% off and seeing some advertising up to 80% off. And I guess like the optimist on side of me tells me that they're just trying to get market share early, share of wallet early, before, media prices are too high or whatever. The pessimist in me sort of says like, I don't mind going early, but just the depth of the discounting is a little bit alarming. And I think just that reiterating that discounting, unless it's your strategy, like Aldi, who we've talked about, or everyday low prices, Coles, or unless it's your strategy, discounting really devalues your brand. It's literally the definition of devaluing your brand. So I think it's just a warning shot for people who spend 11 months of the year telling consumers, their loyal consumers or would-be consumers, how great their product is and how it's better quality than everyone else, and we use superior materials, and we're elevated, and that's what we hear. And then you go up to 80% off, and you expect customers to cop that and come back. So I think it just a reminder that discounting does damage a lot of brands. And I guess to answer your question, what stood out to me is the depth of discounting and the earliness of the discounts. What about you?
Yeah, I would say definitely the earliness, and I have noticed a bit of the depth of it as well. Interesting, what you said before about the sign of desperation, but then the optimism you says that people are trying to do it to avoid the rush. I've heard that line from so many people who said, we wanted to go in early because we wanted to make sure we didn't get crowded out in the noise and we were getting people's share of their wallets earlier. I get that to a certain point, but you don't go that early. You don't go November 1st unless you really, really need to go that early. Yeah. One thing which has stood out to me is a lot more people are trying the tactic now of doing like a deal of the day. So every few days, rotating like a different offer and going out with that, particularly if you are going to be running a sale for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the whole damn month. You do need these things to keep people's attention. You've got to give people a reason to keep coming back to you. Because generally, as we all know, historically, day one is when you do somewhere from 30 to 40% of your total revenue for the entire period will probably be done on day one. Thereabouts, and your mileage may vary on that number. But now with people going longer and longer and longer, it's clear that day one can't sustain them anymore. So they need to do more things throughout that to continue to garner interest throughout the sale. So I've noticed a bit of that already. I've noticed one particular brand, every second day, they've been rotating their offer out. So they had like a 2-for-1, different products, different brands. I've seen some other brands now go with like different categories. They're offering different ones, and this is a tactic which I think can work very well. One of our clients, Maison de Sabre, they've done that the last 2 years, and it's worked incredibly well for them, as well, and it's helped sustain the sale. But they've also been very smart with it as well by only focusing on certain categories and certain variants and pushing those during those times rather than going too broad with it. So it's an interesting tactic, which I'm expecting to see a bit more of, particularly as I speak to a few more retailers about what their plans are. They're going to be trying a few of that. Apologies, you can probably hear my dog barking in the background. So you did the smart thing and put yours outside.
Yeah,
Mine didn't want to go outside. I've got a very stubborn pug. So I think seeing a bit of that, so that's probably the main observation I've seen. A lot more people using SMS now. I reckon I've had about 8 or so SMSs with people kicking off their sales. So SMS, whereas I think the last 2 years hasn't been used all too often. A lot of brands not using SMS. Now I feel a lot of brands are using SMS. Probably what happens when everyone says you need to be doing more SMS, which I know you and I have all year. Matter of fact, one of your predictions at the start of the year was SMS, more people using SMS. Lo and behold, that's exactly what people are doing. So now you're also getting more and more SMSs. So you've kind of got all these things where everyone's copying each other, but also at the same time, you need to do more things to differentiate, to stand out in the market, which I think the deal of the day thing is potentially helping as well.
Yeah, the SMS is good. I'm pleased to see that. I mean, it makes sense. You're glued to your phone, right? And you, depending on the country that you're in, you can sort of, skirt a little bit around opt-in laws and so on. But it's great because, we talked about last week, I think you said Google cost per clicks are up 30% or something. So we need to look at these other channels. And we also talk about the fact that if you're going to discount, you probably need to pull your marketing spend back in terms of a percentage, a marketing efficiency ratio. And to do that, you lean on your own channels. And, you might have a database of 100,000 people on your email database, and you'd be lucky to get a 20%, 25% open rate. So SMS is really that channel that can get that cut through, that 50% open rate or more.
Yep.
So nice to see that the SMS making a bit of an appearance.
Yeah, speaking actually of your own channels, one tactic which I highly recommend everyone look at doing is actually to start retargeting your existing list. Like if you've got that list of 100,000, 10,000, whatever the number is, making sure you are focusing on warming them up, particularly of the ones who have been disengaged for the last little while. The 75% who aren't opening your email, make sure you warm them up. What you want to do is make sure that when you do send that first email or that SMS, that you're in their consideration set. The last thing you want to do is to be just emailing them and just expecting the email just to do all the work.
Yeah. So how would you do that, Mal? What do you reckon? Put it into Meta?
Yeah, put it into Meta. Do custom audiences. So create a custom audience there and just run it more for a frequency campaign. So really focusing for those custom audiences and just hitting them as many times as you can. Because they've bought from you before, they've subscribed to you before. So trying to warm them up is going to be much cheaper than trying to target them exclusively for a conversion objective. If you just focus on them purely for conversion, it's going to be expensive, particularly if they're not likely to respond to you and they have kind of churned out. So if you focus on them more for reach and frequency and get them with some content which is going to re-engage them, get them interested in the brand again, when you send the email or when you flip them over into a conversion campaign, they're going to be more likely to respond.
Yeah, great tip.
So, yep.
Well, I had one for you on a different topic, unless you had some other points on that.
No, that's it.
Okay, so Google released a core update recently regarding SEO. I want to see if you can sum that up, what that change means or what that update means for people. And then a second part to that is a question that pops up a lot is how relevant or how important is SEO?
Yeah, so the Google core update is Google's change to the algorithm, which happens fairly often. So probably every 6 months or so, they do a core update. And what that means is that they're always looking for ways to make the Google experience, the Google search experience, more relevant for users. So the people who are going in there and searching for things. So some recent core updates I've done have been last year, they had the helpful content update, which actually meant that if your content was useful to people, which meant that, it was informative, it was something which would actually help people achieve a task, they were more likely to promote that in the rankings versus content which was just written just purely for search engines. So going back to like the very, very early days, back when I first started building websites back in like 1996, one of the tactics back then was keyword stuffing. You would figure out whatever keyword you wanted your site to rank for, and then you would just stuff that keyword as many times as you can within every single web page. It would look horrible, so then you would change the color of the keyword so that it would blend in with the background. Google recognized that people were keyword stuffing, and they very quickly, probably within about a year or so, that was quick at the time, they would then release a core update, which meant that if you had a keyword which had the same hex color as the background color, they wouldn't recognize that. Then they eventually removed keyword stuffing altogether, and as their machines got smarter, they had different core updates to recognize when things were like just keywords being stuffed in or whether they were in the context of a proper sentence. And as the technology has evolved, particularly with AI, they're now looking for more ways to actually make sure that with all the content that's going to be coming out and has been coming out lately as more people use AI to assist them with writing, that they're helping users find the right content which is actually going to be useful for them. So a great example of this is the fact that Google have not actually said don't use AI for content, and a lot of people have said that if you get content written by AI, Google is going to downrank you. That's 100% not true. And matter of fact, the Google engineers have actually said that that's not going to happen.
Interesting.
What they have said though is that the content needs to be helpful. So if you are going to write content with an AI, it needs to be written so that it's got an angle to it, which is actually going to be useful for someone. So let's say I'm selling a frying pan, which is catered towards professional chefs. I would want to write a blog or get an AI, a ChatGPT, to help me write a blog about why professional chefs need to use a certain type of frying pan. That would be useful because it would actually be informative about why certain types of frying pans are better matched to different types of chefs or different types of cooks. And then you then have a link going back to your product, something like that. because that's useful rather than just being a generic article about frying pans, which happens to mention your brand, which isn't particularly useful. If you wrote an article from the point of view of like why professional chefs need certain frying pans, that would be considered useful and more likely to get promoted up, upranked in the search results.
Yeah, so that's really good to hear, because relevancy has always mattered, but it means that you have to be somewhat knowledgeable on the space. And so for me, I've been using that strategy of kind of on my website, learnecommerce.com.au. I will have a blog, and I found the blog or the newsletter has been fantastic. I will try and write about topics that people are Googling or that I'm being asked about. And then I will, obviously try and just write the blog to be useful, not really thinking about keywords, but they're there, but I really try and make the title of the blog what people will search for. And in the fields for SEO in my platform, I'll often go through ChatGPT, say, give me 160 characters, that sum up this for SEO purposes. And I find that it works. And so, like, just while you were talking about that today, I just typed in learn e-commerce, and I'm ranking on page 1 organically, probably after about 4 months of just consistency with this approach. And I think that's a really good tip that most brands aren't doing, is have a blog. And people, I've heard this before, they're like, yeah, but the blog doesn't convert. Yeah, that's fine. It's bringing traffic. It's another source of traffic. Have a blog. As you said, don't just stuff it with keywords, but write about a subject that is actually useful to people. And then that's exactly what I've done, is link my article to various things that I want people to see. And I think that's a really good, easy hack that people could take advantage of. I just feel like people aren't using blogs anymore as retailers.
Well, I think everyone gets seduced by like the bright, shiny objects. So we look at TikTok, we look at Instagram, we look at, whatever other platforms out there, and we want to do that rather than doing the things which require a bit more hard work, but actually probably deliver a lot more value. Another brand which I work with, Sportitude, one of the strategies we use is to actually write different blogs targeting serious runners. So people who are either serious about running or are serious about getting into running more seriously. So 2 blogs we've written. One we wrote about the top 6 bucket list marathons around the world, which is for any serious marathon runner. They find that, they read that, they comment. It gets probably about 1,000 plus organic views each week, which is phenomenal, and converts to sales. I reckon that blog alone, it's not meant to convert, but it probably brings in a couple of $1,000 each week.
That's nice.
And then we've also written a blog for every capital city around Australia and the top park runs in each capital city.
That's super clever.
So again, it's bringing in about 500 to 1,000 visits for each blog alone, who are getting exposed to the brand, who are then falling into our bucket, who we can then retarget with ads or things like that, or they're signing up for the email newsletter so that they get our emails, so they come and buy more running gear from us. Because they would otherwise never have heard from us. So each one of these blogs probably delivers about, $500 to $1,000, at least each week. And it's just free money after you write it. But that blog strategy is something which not enough people think of. And look, it doesn't suit every single category either. Like, for instance, something like activewear. If all you're selling is generic black leggings, then it's not going to work for you, because something like black leggings is such a crowded market. No one is going to find a brand for black leggings, search for black leggings and buy from you. There's so many other factors involved with that. But if your focus is black leggings for bodybuilders or black leggings for pregnant women, then you can be more specific. You can write an article about which leggings fit best for pregnant women, or postpartum leggings or things like that. You can actually be more specific with it. So the way to think about blogs, and I do believe this can work for every brand, is to think much more granular with what you're doing. Don't focus on that head keyword, which is the black leggings, but think about what are those more specific long tail keywords which could lead your audience to you. So rather than being really generic about everything, be focused about who your brand is, what your product is, and who your audience is. And from that, figure out all the different topics you could write about, which would appeal to all 3 and which appeal to all of them, whether it be the frying pan example or the park run example, or the black leggings one. Really thinking about what's your product and what questions could someone have about your product, someone in your category be interested about, and then how could we then lead them to discover your brand as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that's really clever. And as you're saying that, I think that the old-fashioned newsletter has a place here as well. And it's probably separate to your EDMs, but your blog could have a section for newsletter subscribers where you send out, information around that. And that for me personally works. But I like the idea that it's also for me, like if you're listening to this, thinking about starting an e-commerce business, why sometimes it's useful to start in an area that you're passionate about is because what we're saying here is like if you're, I don't know, really into Pilates and you have an idea to start an online business, you could think, what's a problem that I could help solve in Pilates? And then when you go to write this blog or film your content, it becomes natural to you. You can actually give advice. You can actually inform in a blog. And I think that's a really natural progression. I think about the fashion brand that I saw who had a blog, and they didn't mention their product, which I thought was great. It wasn't selling product. It was a proper blog, but it went too far into entertainment, and it was too irrelevant. It was somewhat relevant, but it was too much of an entertainment blog, and kind of probably went a little bit too far away from not talking about their product. But I think finding that niche and having a blog that's a really good source of information is massively underrated.
I think more and more it's going to be important for every brand to be content creators. Whether it be writing a blog, recording a podcast, things like that. It's going to become so important just to be able to have your voice out there, because there's so much noise out there in terms of just pure advertising that you need other ways to be able to create those sort of meaningful connections with your customers. And the way to do that is through content, by actually creating content which your audience wants to see. Another brand which does that incredibly well is Adore Beauty. Adore Beauty, their podcast is one of the most, I think it's like in the top 5 fashion or beauty or lifestyle podcast in Australia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's just all about beauty tips, makeup tips.
Yeah.
And it performs incredibly well from them, but it wasn't something which they set out to make an amazing ROAS from the very beginning. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to put a piece of content out there, which meant that every week, thousands of young men would be listening to a podcast and just being reminded over and over again about Adore Beauty, because this is the Adore Beauty podcast.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Really clever. And I was having this exact conversation with the guys at Budgie Smuggler this morning, who I think would be great for that, sports and funnies and things like that. But yeah, content creators, we all kind of have to become content creators.
Yeah, we look at Sportsbet, like Sportsbet's videos. It's just content. It's just great. It's amazing content.
It is, yeah.
I can imagine Budgie. I can imagine the Budgie guys doing something like that.
I'm going to send them this Adore Beauty one.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Paul, I think that's all we have time for this week. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, good luck to everybody who's, running those cyber promotions. Remember to keep your sales high and your margins higher.
Love that. On that note, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you do like the podcast, please give us a like or a comment. Give us 5 stars on the Apple Podcast app or whatever your favorite app is. And we will see you back here next week.
Ciao.